So I'm finally making this video after such a long time, and even now it still feels raw in my heart. So be patient, be patient with me as I rewind events and give you the gist as clearly as I can. So we got married in September of 2020, and of course, just like with most people, I think, at least I believe so, we immediately were trying to conceive, but due to medical reasons, or but due to one medical reasons or another, it just wasn't happening. And then fast forward to 2023, we decided to start fertility treatments and to go for the IVF path. We got appointments, of course, consultations, and everything. The actual treatment was supposed to start, I think, I just supposed to start in December. But then coincidentally, because IVF is not something that you just go start and it's a the process from even starting with insurance guys and talking to them, and it's a long, long, long process. But the main treatment itself was supposed to start in December of 2023. But then coincidentally in October, I got a job in a different city, and as such, I had to move. And this means that, of course, the whole treatment thing could not therefore start because of distance, and also the Kinderwunsch. It's called the Kinderwunsch here. The Kinderwunsch said, okay, when you get to your new city, you can start up there as opposed to trying to do this here. So yeah, that's okay. I started working by December. The job was supposed to start in December of 2023. So by December of 2023, I moved to Hamburg, which is where we live now. Uh, I moved only to find out that we were already pregnant. So by December, we found out that we were pregnant. Everything changed for us. We were super excited about this new phase, and we wanted to, we started making plans around everything. It was super exciting for us because yes, this is something we have been waiting for such a long time, and the pressure has been a lot in my mind specifically. And so luckily, family has been very, very supportive. Of course, it's not like anybody was pressuring us in in any way, but just we ourselves were just under a lot of pressure by our own self. Like why is it taking so much time? And if you have been trying to conceive, you can understand how that can feel. So of course, this was super, super exciting, um super exciting for us to find out. We shared the news, we shared the exciting news, with our friends, with family. Of course, it was our first pregnancy. We're really over the moon. It was super exciting time for us. We talked about so many things. We talked about baby names. We talked about who we wanted as godparents for the child. And all the good stuff. We were really. In fact, I was saving design ideas for nurseries. Like, okay, this is how I'm going to be designing my baby nursery, and all. I was really, 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 really over the moon. My husband, in his own way too, he was like super protective. Don't walk here without support. Don't do this one. I don't want you falling down or anything. He was already preparing to shop. Like shopping for different things. Like this we just buy a football for whether a boy or a girl. You're gonna play football. He doesn't care. you know. And the for the first few weeks, my husband was still living in Wuppertal at the time. Remember, we were in Wuppertal before we moved to Hamburg. He was still living in Wuppertal while I was in Hamburg, and the weekends would visit each other. So the appointments I had to go, and all of that with the gynecologist, and even though he was not in Hamburg, he still tried to make sure that every day, every time it was my appointment with the gynecologist, that he would do his best to be in Hamburg for that appointment. So he would probably shift his own appointment, or just move things around to make sure that he's here. This is while we're still looking for an apartment. Remember, I've given you all my all our gist about how we struggled to find an apartment here. But we're managing the whole distance thing. I was here by myself. Of course, it was not stressful. It was just, the first trimester in this case. Nothing complex. I was not ill or anything. So it was okay. All in all, really exciting, and we're just building lots of good memories. But then fast forward to 20 to week 20, actually 20 weeks. Yes, fast forward to about week 20. That was exactly 142 days of pregnancy. I don't think I can forget, because this is the day that everything came crashing down for us. It was anyway, we had gotten an apartment at this time. My husband had already moved our things. We're, of course, now fully in Hamburg, and we're much settled, and finally ready to you know know the gender of the baby and all that good stuff. I was really excited. The appointment was at 4:30 p.m. because I usually like to make my appointments in the evening, due to the fact that I come back from the office first, then I can go for my appointment. Okay, so anyway, 3:30. That day actually I worked from home, so that I will not be in a hurry, and all of that. So 3:30 we got ready. We left the house to go for this appointment. Excited. Today is the day we know whether we're buying male or female things, and all that stuff. We got to the appointment, normal exchange pleasantries with the gynecologist, and yeah, you guys ready to know the baby? Yeah, where we are, and everything was going on well, and all the checks had been done and all. But then at some point, as we were talking and all, I can remember clearly that somehow her face, changed, and and her eyes just gradually was just everything was just spreading to her face, and I could see that she was studying the screen with a different kind of intensity, than usual. And at that moment, I was just thinking to myself, okay, something is not, it's not right. And she was like, okay, give me a second, let me consult with my colleague. And then she went out, she called a colleague. A colleague came into the room. Now I've forgotten what they call this room, but anyway, came into the place, the office, not the office, the place where they check all your stuff, I don't know, my mind is just loose now. Anyway, the colleague came, and they looked at the screen together, and they talked for a bit, and then they were like, and then after talking to the colleague, because they were speaking in German, of course she took permission. She was like, okay, sorry, just permit me to talk to her in German, because it would be easier for them to communicate, of course, in German. So now when they were talking, whatever it is we were discussing now, I couldn't really get what was being said. By the way, I was at this point like really worried what's going on. So when she was done talking to her colleague, she was like, let's go into the office. At this point, I was like, madam, can you tell us exactly what's going on? Like, what's all this? What's all this? Like, let's do that. What's this? With all the, sudden change in the atmosphere, my hands were sweating. So we sat down, and then she started the longest explanation of my life, which I cannot even begin to go into the details of. But the gist of it was that the umbilical cord was too short, and as the baby kept growing, the cord kept pulling its insides, and now at this point, there's a big hole in the stomach of the baby, with all the organs now outside of the baby's body instead of inside of the baby's body. I could understand. I could not understand what I was hearing, because it was like, what do you mean by the baby? What do you mean by the organs outside his body? Like, my head was spinning. Oh, Jesus Christ. So she called a specialist doctor and asked that the doctor sees us. Now, they had some relation. They had a relationship with, I think, their friends or something. So because it was already like close of work, because at this point it was already past 5, and normally the doctor should have closed, but the doctor said she would wait for us to come, and then we started heading to the hospital that they had sent us to. The hospital was just a 9 minute walk from my gynecologist, but that 9 minutes was the longest 9 minutes of my life. Was the longest walk of my life. I could not feel my legs. It was cold, but I was sweating. I was speed walking so far. Like I was just thinking in my head, maybe if I walk fast enough, maybe if I arrive at the hospital early enough, maybe the doctor can save the situation. So I was walking super, 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 super fast. In fact, my husband, as fast as he walks, he was clearly struggling to catch up with me because I was just speed walking, and he of course too is like also in his mind too, was also all over the place. Anyway, we got there. We met the doctor. She did her own specialized scans. She did her own stuff, and then she held my hands. That was when I knew that it's over. That is this cannot be good news. The way she held my hands, I just knew it couldn't be good news. Um, she started explaining how bad the situation was. How that the hole itself was not, the hole alone is not even the only problem. Like the bones were already bent, the legs were bent, the hands were bent. Of course, I mean the bone structures were bad. Because all of these organs had been outside the body, so the spine had gotten weak and everything had just lost its formation, as it were. So clearly it was a really, really bad situation at the point. And because the first doctor had told us that it might be possible to save the situation, but a specialist will need to be able to confirm this and be able to tell what way would be best to go. So now she is clearly telling us that this is really bad. This is like the extreme points of this particular kind of situation. This is not something that happens regularly. According to her, it's not very common, because we're asking, what happened, what could have caused this, how could it have been avoided, this kind of thing. The doctor was like, there's no cause, there's no way that it could have been avoided, and it's a rare case. But what in fact she even said that she even said that it's so rare that most of the cases has been stuff they read in books. So it's not a very common thing, as it were. But that what they do know, however, is that it doesn't happen to one person twice. I'm like that's supposed to be some sort of a consolation. Any case, the options that they gave us was then, okay, either we carry the pregnancy to full term, give birth to the baby, and then just sit and watch the baby die. That was one option. The next option was that, okay, we give birth, take full term, give birth, and try to get the organs back into the body and patch, close the hole, take some skin and some other parts of the body to, do some grafting and all that, and see what can be salvaged. However, the downside is that, of course, because all the organs have grown outside, these organs we didn't develop in the right conditions, so they're going to suffer for life. There are going to be lots of struggle with different kinds of illnesses. And remember, the bones in the back and the hands and everything are deformed and stuff. So the child will be needing support for the rest of their life. They'll be having lots of health complications. They would have, they would do the much that they can do, of course, to ensure that this is a person. But then you'd have to give this child support for the rest of their lives. And the last option was to terminate the pregnancy already, instead of going through with it. Um, and then she was if we needed time to think about it. I said no, we don't need time. We're terminating it. I didn't even ask my husband what he thought about it, which in retrospect, to be honest, was unfair because at this point I was suddenly so upset. I didn't even remember to ask him what he thinks about it because it's not just me in this. It's both of us. It's two people. So the fair thing would have been to know what he thinks. But at this point, I was so pissed. I was suddenly angry, not just in pain, but angry. Anyway, she went ahead to explain what the next steps are, and so the next steps were to do like a genetic testing to get some tissue from the baby, do some genetic testing, just to be sure that there are no genetic disorders, because of other babies that we would, of course, want to have. And then she was going to, make an appointment for us. Not make an appointment, rather make an appointment for us and give us like an supervisor to another hospital where the pregnancy is going to be terminated. So she was talking about how that I might have to, push this baby out, and I was like, I'm not going to go through that kind of torture. I was upset. I was like, you guys better find a way because I'm not going to do that. Like, anyway, we got all the transfer papers, the appointment to go to the next hospital. That's where the evacuation was going to be done. See, I didn't even when we got all of this, we took everything and then of course went home because this point was already like super late. Before all this back and forth, everything was already like past 6 at this point. So of course we went home, and I didn't even speak to my husband. I just went straight to the bus station. I'm sure he didn't even know what to say because he too was like he was so baffled. Anyway, we got to the bus. Of course, we took the bus and we're just gonna out. I was in a different world entirely because a lot of things were going through my mind. I was pissed. I was in pain. I was angry. It was everything. And but at this point, I hadn't cried. Yes, okay, I cried in the doctor's office, just like less than a minute. I was like, just the initial shock of it, but that was it. And then as soon as I stepped into the house, I just burst into real tears. I screamed from the depth of my soul. It was that's the best way I can explain it. I groan. When is it? When the Bible talks about groaning, it's not the say groaning in the spirit with with utterances that cannot be uttered. It's not that one. Oh. Like I cried so much, and I, like I said, I was beyond hurt. I was upset. I was at this point. I was upset with God because why? Like why would He let this happen? Like after all we have gone through already. I was upset with myself as well because I felt guilty in some way. I blamed myself for. Give me a minute. I blame myself for not being able to, even take care of a pregnancy. It was like it felt like it was my fault in some way. Like it was in some way my fault. And then I remember the times I did not take my vitamins. I'm like, you see yourself. It's a simple pregnancy. You cannot even you cannot even handle that. Like, how can you even take care of a baby? Like a lot of different thoughts were going through my mind. It was that evening was the longest evening, or let's say longest night of my life, because anyway, I cried after I cried for a bit. I then stood up, and started admonishing myself. I was saying, you will not cry. You will not let the devil see you cry. You will not. The devil will not rejoice in your pain. All this kind of Christian affirmation kind of thing. And I was saying all those kind of things, which in retrospect now I think was very wrong. I shouldn't have done that. I should have allowed myself grieve properly, because that was the only time I cried. That was the only time I ever cried about the situation, and that was it. I stood up, I picked up my phone, and then I wrote a message to everyone that we have already told about the pregnancy, to tell them, okay, the good news that we shared with you, unfortunately, is no longer. We're no longer going to be able to wrap up this good news in praise, as it were. It was more like, call me now or forever remain silent. Something something like this. Call me now, let's get about with this, and let's just move on. And when people did call, in fact, a lot of people were even wondering, you don't even sound, you don't even sound like you sound very strong, like you're I was even making jokes. Oh my god. I really didn't let myself grieve, which was very silly. It was really, really silly. So all of these emotions, I just bottled everything up, and all of this thing, morphed into depression. I started stress eating, started putting on so much weight. I was rebelling against myself. Even though I was smiling, and I was always cracking jokes every time. I'm always like messing around with people. But I think that was just a form of depression. Anyway, 2 days later, 2 days after this particular day, which was precisely on April the 28th, 2024, we finally said goodbye to our baby. My husband was in a limbo, to be honest. He was just, of course, I could see that he was not, it was here and not here. It was just in a limbo. But he would always check in. He would always check in to say, how are you doing? How are you? And at some point, I realized that I've not even asked this guy, like, how are you too? Like, after all, he also lost a baby. It wasn't just me, that experienced this loss. I was just carried away in my own world of grief. Or I don't know. Now that I even think about it, I think that was also another way in which I was grieving, even though I didn't consciously let myself do that. When I realized that I haven't spoken to him about all of this yet. Imagine, it's already like 3 days. That was when I was like, this is ridiculous. I finally, had to ask her, how are you doing? How are you two doing? And also, checking as well. Any case, on that day we went to the hospital that we were already booked for, and of course they'll say, okay, come, who's going to be with you after um all the shenanigans that happens when you go to the hospital. And then the evacuation was done, and later in the evening, when I felt a lot better, my husband came back to pick me, and then we went back home. And for the next couple of weeks, I was just numb. That's the best way to put it. I was just numb. When we were even coming back from the hospital, I was like, let's stop at KFC. And we bought a big bucket of chicken wings, and I just sat down and I was just eating it. I was eating all kinds of rubbish. I was eating all kinds of things during that period. I would stay. I would ask my husband to. I wasn't going outside at all. Like I was just stuck inside the house. I'll tell my husband to help me get cookies. Should buy the big bucket of cookies, or if he's not in, I would go. I would take a stroll to there's this Aldi shop not far from us. I'll go there and buy a big bucket of cookies, and then I'll sit down and I'll just be eating all kinds of rubbish. I'll eat bread and milk. I was eating nonsense. And when I'm eating it in my mind, I'll say to myself, this is unhealthy. What you're eating is not. And then I'll respond to myself and say, it's not as if Shebi, you were trying to eat healthy before. What has the healthy eating done for you? The healthy eating is as the child not gone after all the healthy eating, what has happened? So please. So I was ridiculous. I was putting on so much weight. I was not doing anything. I was upset about everything, but I was not showing that I was upset. I was just quiet, not talking much. When people called me, I try to talk as normal and as in my normal exciting personality as much as possible. Try not to. I was like, no one should, because in my mind I'm like, I've given you put the time to call me to do your consolation. Consolation time is gone. Like I don't need any of that anymore. And of course, family will always be family. They always be worried for you. They're always calling to check in. At some point, I got pissed. That they were calling so often to check on how you're doing. Sometimes when I see their call, I don't even pick it anymore. I'm like, please, like people should leave me alone. People should leave me alone and all that stuff. And then when certain things happen, then you just remember, and then you start crying all over again. But the kind of cry that I was crying at that time was not like cry of you cry and water come outside from your eyes. It's a cry that you cry inside your chest. Like you cry inside your chest, something like that. Yeah, was it? It was terrible. It was. Anyway, on one of those days, one of those sad days, I thought to write a note to write a note to this baby that will never get to read these notes. I think somehow maybe this note was really for me and my husband much more than anything else, because it's not like I was going to read the notes anyway. And let me share the notes with you guys. I okay. The note says, "Hey kiddo, even though we didn't get to meet you to guide you and watch you blossom into greatness, we loved you with every love in our hearts. We love you with every love our hearts could muster, and you will always remain there in our hearts. You are not forgotten, and the memories of you when you were here will remain cherished. Love, mom and dad." Now this sounds quite cheesy, I know. It might sound weird, but it has been very comforting for me in some way. Like I said, maybe the note really is for me in a way. I don't know. Um, but to anyone who has lost a child, or lost a baby in pregnancy, lost a child, even if it's after pregnancy, a child would always be that a child to you. I want to remind you that it wasn't your fault. You're not alone. And if you still desire to have another child, keep the faith alive. Your joy will come. And as I talk to people about the loss, because now I'm much more comfortable to talk about it. At the time when it happened, of course, I wasn't talking. I was just ignoring it completely when I'm talking to people, as it were. But now that I'm talking about the loss more, it's amazing to know how many people have experienced this kind of loss. Maybe not exactly in the same way or manner that we did. in some sort of way, a miscarriage, a stillbirth. Um, you know, it's amazing how many people go through this. Either losing a pregnancy or having to terminate it, or having a stillbirth, or one crazy thing, or another. When someone says to me, my dear, same thing happened to me, or this, or I also lost my baby, or I also had a stillbirth, or I also had to terminate, or I'm like, like I didn't know that this is I didn't know how common, how common this is. And it's amazing because so many people don't talk about it, which is very understandable why people don't. Is a it's a painful experience to go through, and even much more painful to talk about. But knowing that a few other people had experienced the same thing also brought some sort of relief, will I say, or some sort of comfort. I don't know if that's even a bad thing, because now that I think about it, it feels like corporate suffering kind of thing. Yeah. Not that I'm happy that some other person had experienced the same loss. I don't wish that on anyone at all. But just knowing that this has happened, someone I know, someone I can see, it has happened to them, or something similar had happened, and they still, came out of it. They still, you know, found the strength or found the comfort that they needed, or they've moved on to, eventually have their own baby at the end of the day and stuff. It's somehow gave me some sort of relief a little bit. But the pain, I don't think would ever go away. I doubt that it will. Even till now, when I think about it, I still get teary eyed a bit. It's not a hurt that I don't believe will. I don't know. They say time heals everything, but I don't know if this is one. This is a hurt that time will heal. Maybe because of how it had been for us, and considering that if it felt like we had gone through so much to get to this point, and then it was just snatched away from our hands and stuff. I don't know, maybe that's what adds to how difficult it is to get over, or maybe that's the way every other person feels. I don't know, but this is my own experience, or anyway, or my own feeling. For now at least, maybe later, maybe in the next 10 years, next how many years, maybe it's an experience I might completely forget, and have somewhere down my memory. But for now, it still feels quite raw in my heart when I think about it. But we're still we're still grateful. We're still grateful to God, and we're still having faith in God, and believe that He has the best plans for us. Because to be honest, at some point in all these stories, at some point I really started questioning, like, what have I done to you, oh Father in heaven? What did I do? you know but I and my husband, we both believe that God has perfect plans for us, and that has also quite helped to overcome a lot of the other aspects of the loss, which is like depression, of feeling upset. Like now, I'm not upset anymore. I've not been upset about it for a while now. Actually, it's just that the pain or the hurt is still there. But in terms of upset, the way I was at the time, it's no longer something I think I grew up with. I think yeah, it's not. Anyway, thanks for listening to my blabbing today. Until next time, show grace to yourself and show grace to other people. You never know what people are dealing with. You never know what people are going through. So show grace to them. And please don't ask people stupid questions. Please don't ask people stupid questions like someone is married and you're asking them, how far, when are we, when will they come do this one? When are we coming for Omugo? When are we coming to celebrate the baby? When are we this? I don't ask people such stupid questions. Like, don't put unnecessary pressure on people. You don't know what they're dealing with. You don't know what they're struggling with. Just be kind to other people. I know people say this all the time a lot, but you still see a lot of people still doing the same thing. You see somebody who just be in church, somebody will just come and start praying for you. I know that sometimes this is from a place, from a good place, but please do the prayers in your house. Pray for the person in your quiet time, in your private life. Not don't make things a lot more difficult for the person. I've just started going on and on now, but that brings me to the end of the video. Until next time, have a fantastic day. Bye.